In all of our previous examples, we have been working exclusively with user data entry. So we have a two-way communication between our process or our program and the user. That doesn't necessarily equate to the most common interaction in all of computing. As a matter of fact, users are far and away the less common interaction that a system is going to have with another system. Most systems interaction are system to system or data to data, not waiting on you and your very, very slow, fleshy bits to go and type stuff in. That's not the way this works. Computers are so much faster than that. The most of what happens is system to external source of data. And that's what we're going to see here. So here we're going to create an example of a do-while loop that's working with files. So in this particular example, our program is going to read an employee file and print checks for a payroll process. Now, what I can tell you is I'm going to kind of remove some of the detail that we're seeing here. So I won't burden us with having to work on how to actually print the checks. That's something we'll see in a later chapter when we're looking at print outputs. We'll actually have you worry about what to do to format printed output in a way that it makes the most sense. But for the time being, let's just worry about how we interact with files. And then later on, we'll worry about how to interact with, the actual output of those. So what I can tell you is I'm going to need some variables, things that I can test against. I'm going to need an employee number. I'm going to need employee pay. Sooner or later, I'll need to know employee tax rate and things of that nature. But those are things that I'm really not going to worry about here. I want to worry about what do I need to do to interact with the file, as opposed to what do I need to do to actually get a check printed. So here inside of my employee payroll module, I know that I'm going to have to, the good user design specifies this, that even though I am not going to interact directly with a user, if a user is going to initiate this transaction, they're going to want to know how to do it properly. So I'm going to say that this program will run a batch process. So it's going to run in the background without interaction from you, the user. It's going to read an employee file and it's going to print checks for payroll. That's, good enough for what we need this particular example to do. So what are we going to do? We're going to prompt the user, press any key to begin, and we're going to get any key. This really just lets the user think, and correctly, I would argue, correctly think that they're going to initiate this process, but really they don't have to be a part of any of this process in any meaningful way. So after the user presses the key, we're going to need to read an employee record. So this could be a file someplace, this can be a database someplace, wherever the external data that we need to get this from is located is kind of immaterial. For the time being, let's just agree that we have to go out and grab data from some external source. So I know that we're going to need a do while, and I know that I'm going to let this process kind of run for an indeterminate amount of time. But how long is that? So if I have 10 employees, I know it's going to run 10 times. But if I'm running this as part of a payroll processor, I can't be guaranteed how many employees are out there. I need something to be able to negotiate how many times I need to iterate through a file. The file interactions we have are as follows. So let's get me over here. These are what we can do to express the fact that there might be data in a file someplace. We can say while more data, we can say do while more records, we can say do while records exist, and we can say do while not end of file. We can also express the following as not EOF. End of file is a systems dependent call. So depending on where it is that you are calling end of file, they all look a little bit different. So JavaScript at the end of a file has one EOF marker. Sublime text at the end of a file has a different EOF marker, end of file. But this line maps to every compile time environment that you're going to have an exposure with. This means run a loop until the file it is that you're looking for tells you that it's expressly done. The beauty of this statement like this is I could have 10 employees. I could have 10,000 employees. It doesn't matter. It's going to treat this loop the same way, irrespective of how many data items are in there. And that's really pretty great. As with all do while statements, I need an end do over there. That's going to express to the next developer in the chain that I no longer have any loops that need to be undertaken here. So inside of my loop statement, I'm just going to tell you, again, I'm not worrying about, for this particular example, how to actually print the check. I'm going to read employee details, whatever those employee details are again. So those would be employee number, employee pay, employee tax rate. So it's going to read those. I would put those here discreetly. I would say read employee number, read employee pay, read tax rate. But I'm just condensing this for us here. Print check, ... Hey, this is going to be more complicated than one line. I just need this to be condensed for us. And finally, it's going to read employee record. This is going to indicate that it's going to go ahead and read the next one. So however many there are in there, as long as it can keep reading employee records, this particular do while loop is going to read those employee details, print the check, and then it's going to look for another record as long as there's more records. When there's no more records, so after number 10 here has printed, it's going to come back and look for number 11, and the data element in number 11 specifies to this particular system, I'm done. EOF, no more data, end of file. So then this particular do while loop is done. Now, I would suggest to you that, again, based on just the problem description, which is incomplete, that's not necessarily good user design. How is the user supposed to know that anything happened? We need to actually convey that to the user. We still need, despite the fact that we've printed checks, despite the fact that there's a big pile of checks in a printer someplace, we should, good user design dictates, we should display print process completed, because this is letting the user know that whatever transaction they were undertaking has completed successfully. So when working with files, we're not necessarily going to have time to wait for a user to come and hit next, or whatever we would need to do. We need the data to express for itself that it's that it's going to continue, or that it's not going to continue. And we do that here with end of file. And in the text, we have 4 of these listed. I'm just going to put them down here. Do while, more data, do while, more records, do while records exist, or not EOF. And what my suggestion to you is, just like you see here in this example, line number 19, the exclamation point means not. So it's exactly the same as that expression, just a little bit more simplified. And that's what we do when we work with data in a looping environment.